Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Masks Off. I'm Kim Gross and so happy to have you here with me today. And my guest for today is Kim Muench. And I'm so excited because I have been watching her videos on TikTok and she's amazing and I'm sure she'll share and I will share in the show notes. You have to check her out on TikTok for sure. But as always, I'm going to start with a quote, and the quote is actually from Kim. So the quote is, "Our children come through us, not for us, except for the lessons they reflect to us during their journey in an effort to grow us up along the way." I want to underscore that, in an effort to grow us up along the way. Do you hear me, people? So welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So tell the audience a little bit about who you are, what do you like to do, whatever you want to share.
Okay, well, I am a married mom of 5 kids at this point. I've been married 30 years, and my oldest son is 35, and then I have sons that are 29, 24, 19, and my only daughter is 17. So she's the only one home at this point. And I got that quote that came to me. I think I was in the shower, but I wrote it down immediately when it came to me. Either that or I was vacuuming, one of the two things. That's where I get my most, profound thoughts. And
Or
I guess,
before going to bed at night. I heard you say
yes,
that in a
I
TikTok.
do. But then I lose them because I fall asleep, and once in a while I will get out of bed and literally write it down. If it's a TikTok video, I'm like, I got to write this down. But I walked. I was a very early mom. I'll just go into my history a little bit. So
Yeah.
grew up in the Midwest, was a very young mother at 18. And that turned out to be obviously a very growing experience for me. My son's father was verbally abusive and then became physically abusive. So I got out of the relationship, but had to co-parent with him for the rest of my son's life, obviously. And then I married and had 4 other kids, and still married, obviously, at this point. So when my son was 20, I got a call from him. We were living in Texas and he was still living in Wisconsin, which is our home state. He told me that he was addicted to alcohol, and in a couple of sentences, and I knew something was off, but I didn't quite know, and I wouldn't have guessed it was that. But that began what I call my parenting wake-up call and or my personal awakening. It really forced me to, again, try and navigate how to help a young adult addicted to alcohol, while also looking back and trying to acknowledge where my parenting had contributed to the problem, but not get stuck there. Because I think a lot of parents can get stuck in the, how did this happen? Or I'm such a crappy parent. And, I think it's important to acknowledge, like, one of the things was I didn't spend a lot of time or effort with his dad during high school, because over the years of trying to co-parent, we just could not get along. And so there were times when I avoided his dad. And because I did that, there were things that went on that shouldn't have gone on, drinking and, that kind of thing. So I can look at that, but it's not productive and it doesn't serve myself or my son. I'm saying this to a parent who's in the midst of this, to sit in the muck of that, so it's like, what's the next right step? And the way that we find that as a parent is to reconnect with ourselves. To be able to, parents come to me and they want the answer to a situation. And for me, it's about listening really clearly to them, asking them pointed questions, and having them arrive at what the answer is, because nobody knows our kids like the parents do, right? So I don't, especially when it's in a situation where it's really, there's mental health and or substance abuse issues going on. I don't want to be giving anybody an answer, but I'm sure really good at listening at helping them ask important pointed questions and helping them get to the answer that they need for their particular family member. So as you mentioned, so long story short, I went to college, and I went back to college, and my intention was to become a licensed chemical dependency counselor. Along the journey of that, I decided helping teenagers with addiction issues was not what I wanted. I wanted to help parents. So I became a certified parent coach in 2016, and I have been working with parents of adolescents since that time. An evolution in the last year and a half-ish is getting on TikTok. And what kept coming back at me were these parents of 18 to 25-year-olds who are really trying to figure out, like, what does it look like to parent? I know my kid's out of high school, and I just didn't anticipate. I thought once I got him to 18, everything would be okay. And, I've got this 20-year-old who's drinking and he's failing out of school, or I've got this, 23-year-old daughter who didn't do well in COVID, and now she's in the basement smoking weed, and I can't get her to get a job, and she's not moving forward. So this is the kind of parent that I help them, really work through their anxieties and fears and reconnect to themselves so that they can put boundaries and incremental steps in place for their kids, so they can help these kids move out into, independent life. And that looks different for every young adult. It's not first you do this, then you do that, then you do that. So I have enjoyed doing TikTok videos, and that is directly resulting in the clients that are finding me to do this work.
Yeah, that's awesome. So this is Masks Off, right? So we talk about the different masks that we wear, whether it's a perfection mask, people pleaser mask, the rescuer, the super uber competent mask, peacemaker is another mask. These are all ones that I have worn, by the way, as I name them off. And so I'm wondering if you can share if you have worn any of those while you were raising your kids, and if you did, how were you able to take off the mask? What kind of work did you do? Or do they still show up for you?
That's a very good question. And I would say a lot of times in my kids' earlier years, I've worn a mask of covering up anxiety. I guess the mask would be the mask of confidence. I think that parenting is the most important work we can do, but also nothing brings our own anxieties and challenges up like raising kids. So there's definitely been more than one moment in parenting 5 kids where they've been going through something where I've worn the mask of confidence when I wasn't so sure that everything was going to work out, right? I mean, that I think has happened a lot. But I've also been a parent long enough to know at this point, and I've done a lot of my own work, that somehow things will work out, and maybe not the way that I want or need them to work out or think they'll work out, but somehow, even if it's through, a off-track way, things will work out to my child's growth in some way, and that's what we're here to do. I mean, that's what, parents, they want to rescue and they want to fix things, and they don't want to see their kids. I just talked to some parents this morning whose 18-year-old son is coming home, and they know he's over drinking, and they're worried, and they want to put their foot down about it while he's home for the holidays. And that's, but they're not willing to put any really hard consequences into place because they're afraid. Yeah. Right. They're afraid. And I get that. But let's first see is this really a problem? If you don't put any boundary in place, you're not going to know, because he may have an issue with addiction. I don't know. Right. But if you put some boundaries in place and they just can't meet that or won't meet that, it's a sign that there's a bigger problem. So we got to address the problem, but we can't do that if the parent is so afraid that, if they put something in place, if they set a boundary, their kid, won't meet it. They're afraid, they can't trust themselves is what it is. So, yeah, so definitely a confidence mask I've worn. I definitely have been one to, I don't know what mask this would be. Maybe you can help tell me, but one to be probably the peacekeeper, because I really, for a long time, did not want to face conflict. I'm not comfortable in that, although I'm much better at it now. But I think there's a lot of times when there was conflict either between my oldest son and my husband, or even myself and my son's father when he was, during those growing up years, that I just didn't have enough confidence in myself and didn't like conflict. So spent a lot of time behind that.
I would say, because I can also relate and share in that, is that conflict avoidant would definitely fall under either, yes, the peacekeeper, peacemaker, or even people pleaser, because the people pleaser will often avoid conflict. And also going back to the mom or the parents that you just talked about that won't or is resistant to setting boundaries, like that is a hallmark characteristic of the people pleaser, is to not set boundaries, avoid boundary setting. Like I had very, very wishy-washy boundaries with my kids when they were growing up, particularly my daughter. Anytime we went shopping, and it's a running joke now, but anytime when she was like 13, 14, and we went to the mall, she would say, Mom, can I get this expensive thing? And I'd say, no. Mom, can I get this thing? No, that's 2 times. Mom, please, can I please get it? No, that's 3 times. Really, Mom, I promise I'll do blah, 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 blah if you get it for me 4 times. And finally, on the 5th time, okay. So they knew all they had to do was wait it out.
Outlast you. Yeah.
And Mom will fold.
Yeah. And I think parents get worried about whether or not their kids will like them.
Yeah.
I think that's part of it. I think there's just a lack of confidence in parents right now that I'm seeing. But there's also this balance, especially in the population of parents that I work with, as kids are gaining their independence and they're supposed to be moving towards their independence, they still sometimes need support. And so parents are like, I don't know if I'm supposed to how do I best support this kid who I don't want to enable the situation, but I also am not willing to, just cut them off completely. So what does that look like? And again, it has more to do with you being connected to yourself and using your intuition, which I truly believe that because of all the information and messaging that we get, even from TikTok, that people have an unclear ability to go within and find the answer that they need for their child. What's right for one child is not necessarily right for another. And
well, and I also believe that it's really hard for parents to tap into that intuition, because I feel like what I'm seeing with a lot of people is that we are all acting out of our patterns, whether it is being a people pleaser or perfectionist, or it's the other extreme and it's a parent that's super controlling and has to come from this domineering, place of I'm the boss, it's my way or the highway. But either way, either side of that coin is still coming from conditioning as a child. It is still a pattern that they're playing out, and they're not in their authentic, true self, tapping into, how do I show up in the best way possible for my kid? Just like your quote says, like most parents are not in the business of doing the inner work and being able to recognize that my kid is here to teach me something about me, to grow me up, and that's why I was so I didn't know it at the time, but when I first met Dr. Shafali like 12 years ago, and I heard her speak the first time, she just spoke to my soul, even though I just didn't really know the language, but I did know the language, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I knew in my soul that something had to shift, because my kids were like 13 and 11 at the time. And I had such an unfulfilling relationship with them. I was either crying or I was mad, but I was completely operating out of my conditioning and the way my mom raised me. And I was in lack and scarcity and blah, just a mess. And then I just started to do the work, and I learned more and more from Dr. Shafali and started to heal from within. And I'm so grateful, because it's so changed the relationship that I have with my kids now, and they're 23 and 20. And, they can now say to me, they'll call me out like, Mom, because one of my go-to patterns is to go into anxious, nervous. So I get anxious and nervous when I see them suffering, when I see them in struggle. And I do have a question for you to follow up.
Okay.
But they are so good at being able to like put the hand up and say, Mom, this is you, this is your stuff. And I give myself credit, because then I'm able to pause enough to step back and look at it and say, you know what, this shit is mine. This is me. And 99% of the time it is. I'm going to own that. 99% of the time it's my shit. My daughter's 20, she's in school, and sometimes I get into anxious, nervous about whether she's going to pass classes or not. That's not my stuff. It is my stuff that I'm worried and anxious about it, but it's for her to figure out, not for me to micromanage her grades and what she's doing in college.
Yeah.
So they can call me out on it, and I then go in and I own it. So I'm really grateful that I'm in that place, instead of, how I used to be like, what's the matter with you? And blah, 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 just coming from a reactive standpoint.
Right.
Where I still, and I've gotten so much better because I go inward all the time, but where I still can get tripped up, Kim, is it's so freaking hard to watch them suffer. Like,
It is.
oh, it's so hard. And one person said to me, it's like, it's in our DNA as moms, maybe even more so than dads. And I don't know if you agree or disagree with this, but it's like in our DNA that we are meant to kind of feel their suffering more when they're in it. What are your thoughts on
Yeah,
that?
and I do think it
Yeah.
takes a lot of strength to hold. I mean, I know I say all the time, holding space for somebody else's feelings. I mean, especially your kids, and hoping. I did a video on this once, and I can't remember how I put it. I got to go back and figure it out, because it's more. It's like hoping that they value when they go through something hard, or they've made an unhealthy choice and they've got to live through some kind of consequence. It's the parent holding space and hoping that the child will value themselves enough to pull themselves through it. Because we all know that, we can't, for the most part, we can't rush in, fix, rescue. It's not helpful, but our job as mom and dad too, obviously, but I think as mom especially, is being the emotional barometer that we are, is to hold the space and hold the, I don't want to say hope. Space sounds like a better thing, like just hold tight, believe in them until they can believe in themselves.
Yeah.
That is the weight of the world. And that's why when they say motherhood, the mental load of motherhood, I think that's it.
Yes, that is good. Say that again.
The mental load of motherhood
mental
is
load.
holding the space for your kid when they're going through something difficult, that they will find within themselves their value and pull themselves through it, because we can't do it for them.
Yeah. So let me ask you, do you do any kind of behind the scenes prep work on yourself to be able to hold the space so that you're not a freaking hot mess when they're a freaking hot mess?
I I am fortunate that in some respects, I mean, the most difficult thing I went through, I think, as a parent was walking with Nick through his addiction. But there's definitely, I mean, it's not to say my kids are perfect and we have, I think coaching other moms helps reinforce for sure. Holding space for mothers' anxieties that come into my Zoom call and they are like, oh my God, this just happened. My kid was home for the holidays, Thanksgiving, and they got drunk and they punched their dad. And, like that, holding space for other moms while you're coaching, I would say is a huge practice in what helps me to be able to stay calm. I also do a lot of meditation. So I think that is definitely, and I'm hoping that we're in a trend now, that we're in a shift in a movement now where people understand the value in meditation and in taking time for yourself and how that leaks into parenting in a positive way. Sometimes people think, oh, it's just one more thing I have to do or whatever. No, actually, it's something that is super beneficial. You have to make it a regular practice, and you will see in all areas of your life how it plays out.
Yeah, completely. All right. One last question then along those lines.
Okay.
So you said one of the most super helpful things is to hold space for our kids when they're having trouble seeing and feeling their own worth and hoping that they will find their way through. Do you, as a mom, in those times, do you say anything? Do you like offer some pieces of wisdom? Do you offer some advice? Do you give them encouraging words? Or do you just kind of like, yes, I know it's hard, honey. It's so hard. I get it. I see it. Or do you tell them, well, do you think about doing A, B, and C or X, Y, and Z, or do you hold back on that?
I try and hold back as much as possible. I really do want my kids to advocate for themselves. I want them to trust their own instincts and gut. That's not to say that I wouldn't give my advice if one of my kids came to me. I absolutely have done that and would do that. But I try really hard. If I am supporting, I'm just thinking about a situation recently with my daughter. Holding space, she's in her room and she broke up with her boyfriend and whatever. Holding space meant that I would just go and I'd knock on her door every little bit and, see if she wants anything or needs anything. Or one time I just kind of sat in her room with her. I asked if I could come in and just kind of sat on her beanbag chair and, just stayed for a few minutes and talked about something random that I saw on Instagram or whatever, and then just kind of left. And it's about being there, but not being intrusive. And it's a very fine line. Less is more, say less. I mean, I talk about the 80-20 rule.
Yes,
like
I was going to say.
Listen 80% of the time, talk 20% of the time. Your time for lots of talk is past. And if you want your kids to open up, I've got quiet sons. My fourth son in particular is very quiet. And it used to make me super anxious because I'm like, what's going on in his head? Is he okay? Blah, blah, blah. And the more I did that, the less helpful it was. So I was just like, you know what? Just shut your mouth and like listen and just see what happens. And he will open up. And when he does, he's a super deep thinker. He's great. And this is who he is. He's just not real open. So I'm there. I make myself known in the kitchen when they're getting ready in the morning, but I'm just there. Like I'm just there.
So I want to say that has been super helpful. That's a great distinction that you made and clarified what holding space can look like, because it doesn't mean all the time that you're like, oh, tell me all that's going on with you. I'm here for you. Just tell me I'm here, and whatever. Sometimes it can just mean, like you said, walking into your daughter's room and just knocking on the door. Hey, I just saw, this on Instagram. So just being visible is also holding space. I love that. I'm so glad that you shared that because, I have two. So I have a boy and a girl, but I have one that overshares and one that undershares. My daughter will call me 5 times a day, blah, 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 and she just like spews off. And then my son is, like you said, he's very deep thinker and doesn't all the time share. But then when he does, sometimes it's like Pandora's box opens, and I cherish that. And I
Me too. Me
I
too.
cherish it and I hold it close. And then here's what we were saying about how we have to freaking own, right, as a parent, because I will be 100% honest, and then we can wrap up here, is that there are times, because it's not often, that I can sense that I'm craving it. I want more of that from him because I want that connection. But that's about me. That's about me, not him. And I can't project that on him. Like, oh, come talk to me. Come talk. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Open up, open up. Like, how's that going to work with your son that's really quiet? If you weren't
Yes.
like following all the time, what's his name?
Maddox. Maddox. Yeah.
Maddox. Maddox, let's
Yeah.
talk. Let's talk. Let's talk.
Yeah. It
Run
wouldn't,
for
it
the
would,
freaking
he would
hills.
tell him, he would go away, like further away. And I will say, so I did this practice of meeting my kids in the bedroom every night. And we had this like little time of talking, right? I call it the party. And when my son Maddox went to college last year, Mia did not want the party anymore. She said, I don't have any need for this. And it made my heart sad because for years we had done this. All the
Yep.
older boys, we had all gathered in the room every night and it was a tradition. But I was like, I can either sit here and be sad about this or not. And so
Totally.
Maddox just came home for Thanksgiving last week and he came and found me. I was downstairs scrolling through TikTok and he came downstairs about 11 o'clock and he's like, hey, let's go have a party. I'm like, well, okay. So he knocked on my daughter's door and we did this silly dance on the way in with some song that he had found that was like, welcome to the party or something, like, let's get this party started, one of those.
Yeah.
And we walked in and she was like, and then she, like, within 30 seconds, she was like, all right, fine, you're here, let's talk. And we talked, like, I literally at 1:30 in the morning was like, you guys, I gotta go to bed.
And then
So,
sometimes you're like, oh, you regret, right? What you wish
yeah.
for. Some,
Well,
yes.
and this feeds my soul. So to your point, when they will let me in, I am incredibly grateful, and that feeds my soul until the next time because it might be a while.
Exactly. Exactly. Oh my goodness. So do you have maybe just one tip or one takeaway for the listeners?
I do, and that I think, well, it's gonna relate to parenting, right? One of the other things that came to me was, how people say kids don't come with a manual. Okay.
Yes.
We are the manual on which our grandchildren will be raised.
Oh,
And so what parents need to think about, that's not to make parents fearful. It's just to help them understand the importance and the legacy work that parenting is. So if there's ways that you want to improve and need to improve and haven't been able to find a way, find the book, Dr. Shafali, whatever, all the things, find someone to help guide you, because we're so willing to invest in our kids, but we don't invest in ourselves. And the reality is we are the manual on which our grandchildren will be raised and great grandchildren. So be very careful on how you're writing that book.
and it's never too late.
And it's never too late. This is why I love working with parents of 18 to 25-year-olds, because even if things have not gone well up until that time, it's never too late. I believe that.
Absolutely. So how can the listeners find you? Of course, whatever you share, I will put all in the show notes, but if they wanted to find you, where would they find you?
Well, if they're on TikTok, they can find me at Kim Muench Parent Coach. I'm also on Instagram at Real Life Parent Guide, Kim Muench at Real Life Parent Guide. And then my website is reallifeparentguide.com.
And how about your book?
My book can be found on Amazon. It's called Becoming Me While Raising You, A Mother's Journey to Herself. And it's a look at my parenting journey, as well as really the topic of limiting beliefs and how they can play out in our marriage and in our parenting and those masks that you talk about.
And I love the title of that, by the way. That's a great title. Oh my goodness. So thank you so much for being here. What a great conversation. And I'm
Can't
going
wait.
to look at holding space with my kids differently after this
Good.
talk.
I'm so glad. I'm so
Yes.
glad. It was been
Yes.
great to talk to you, Kim.
Yes. So thank you everybody for tuning in to another episode of Masks Off, and I will see you next time.